the persona EIM managers. Next week on the 13th, we'll be targeting data citizens. The week after that, data management professionals, and the week after that, the executives. And for those that are new to this webinar, every month there's a different knowledge area or data topic that is being discussed, and we have divided the weeks, as you've seen, into the various personas. So although the subject is the same for the month, the core subject or the foundation of the subject is the same, we're targeting the problem statement or the questions being asked by the various personas and how to deal with it and what to do with those things in terms of that knowledge area. Thanks, Howard. Just to say thanks again. Thanks everybody for joining, taking the time out to join us today. It's fantastic to see the audience coming on, and I'd also like to say thanks to Howard, to Veronica. You'll meet Veronica just now, and Christine as well, for being co-hosts today and for the presentation that they've prepared, and I'm sure we're going to gain some incredible insights into the subject of literacy and career pathing. Again, I have already hit the button just so that we capture the introduction. We'll distribute the recording to those who want to either re-listen or have missed today and want to catch up. And then, of course, Howard's pointed out, for those that were on when we just joined up, there's a special prize today, 2 free data management professional assessments for answering or making observations of the top 2 questions. And the value of that is 4,000 Rand. The output and the discussion today will give you more insights into it, but the output will be a thinking styles assessment and analysis, Strengthsfinders, knowledge area, that's data management knowledge area assessment, data management CV, and data management interview with Howard and Veronica and Christine. So thank you very much for your time again, and thanks, Howard.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And Christine, I didn't tell you, but I think you will be the judge on the best question. And I always like to ask Christine, because she has a different view on a lot of things. So otherwise, we all look at the data and try to find answers over there. So if that's okay with you, will you take notes of the different questions, and will you announce the 2 winners at the end?
Sure, definitely. I'll keep. What prize do I get though?
You'll get a special supper with us.
Oh, lovely. Okay, I'm in.
You might be invited back.
Okay.
Cheers.
All right.
Okay.
Guys, thanks everybody for attending. It's really quite an exciting area that we're dealing with today. Data literacy is a topic on everyone's agenda. And what I have seen in terms of spending a lot of time reviewing all of it is there tends to be a sort of a quite narrow focus on data literacy. And a lot of it comes out of the BI departments and the data science, where they're trying to get people to understand some of the visualizations that they produce. And it's therefore a lot of the times that we've seen, it's about reading, writing, and arguing with data. And really the reading is interpreting graphs and things like that. So it is good in a way that it's great for everybody. And I was just wondering, Paul Krobler is not in, or he may be in. And you are fantastic. And the other day he was saying to me, and it's with both Pauls, Paul Krobler and Paul Bolton, was the ability to read some of the graphs and actually interpret what some of those graphs are saying. Things like the box plots and all the difference. What is it saying, and how do we interpret it? So I don't think that data management professionals, even though they can probably write the data and manage the data, I'm not always too sure that they can understand all the visualizations. So I do think it's applicable to us all, but certainly what I'm finding is that the data management and the data literacy needs to grow into a more rounded and a broader data management mastery, as we refer to. Okay, I can see there are some questions. Paul, are you monitoring the questions? I don't need to Okay, great. Okay, so let's start off just with a little introduction of what I am really enjoying in terms of the 5 steps to building a data literacy program. Understanding the data, finding and obtaining data, reading, interpreting, and evaluating data, managing the data, and then another area of creating, using data and data sets. So that's sort of the pyramid that we go along. And I've sort of split the reading and arguing with data in these 3 areas, and managing and writing data in the other areas. So that's all around the lifecycle management of data, the data-centric resources, understanding why do we need to manage data, what is data management all about, and the how to manage data. So our focus today is for EIM management. Okay, so what are we talking about? We would be talking about a EIM manager, or we'd be talking about a metadata management, and the metadata management would be responsible for a lot of the metadata specialists that work in there, or the metadata within the organization. It may be a data modeler, the data modeler lead, whichever those guys are, they tend to be responsible for the data management professionals in their care. And how do we provide a career path for them? I'll keep on stressing that it's not just about the specialized data management. It's also about reading the data and making sure that you can interpret what the data is saying. Paul Grubler or Paul Bolton, have you guys got any comments on just what I've said there in terms of how important it is for data management professionals to also be able to understand these visualizations and interpretations?
Yeah, I can maybe just make a comment or two. I think, just looking at from my own perspective and how the work that I've been doing with you, there's a couple of things that you had to take me through. And I think it's not because the basic inability to argue with the data, it's just the kinds of visualizations that has become more available to us to use.
Yeah.
All of us can read bar graphs and pies. And I always think of my friend Mark Wilson that says, friends, don't let friends create pie charts. He hates pie charts.
Pie charts are dangerous, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, just confirming there's a lot to be said about not only just understanding what you're looking at, but then being able to argue, argue is maybe the best word, or debate with the data and actually see what you understand.
Yeah, and I think what's important there is the quicker and the better that you can read and understand the data, the better that you're going to be able to argue. So if you're sitting in a big meeting and you don't understand that visualization, you may be tempted to go quiet and not contribute, and that's where the challenges come in. Paul?
Yeah, Howard as well. I think the point was proven, was it last night or the night before, where I jumped to conclusions quickly on a particular visualization, and yeah, for whatever reason, I didn't actually link that specific one to the candlestick view when you're looking at a stock market or a share price.
Correct.
And once I jumped to the conclusion, and my analysis was actually completely opposite to what it was actually representing. And as you say, if you're sitting in a meeting or a board meeting and you're looking at something, your train of thought will be completely skewed because you didn't understand what this thing is trying to tell you.
Okay.
Or how the numbers are rolling up. Yeah.
All right, great. And I think this was we've actually just we haven't finished. We've gone through a process of doing an assessment with a insurance company. We're working with the grads in the academy, and we were very fortunate to do a pre-assessment of the grads. We've taken them through a 4-day data management training. We're now looking forward to a post-assessment, and a lot of it's about the interpretation of where the people are, what their challenges are. How do we provide them a career path for the future? So that's been really exciting. It really makes a difference when you sit in front of a bunch of 10 people and you start pointing out some of the challenges, the strengths. And I'd also like to say up front that, guys, we've specifically chosen assessments not to focus on weaknesses. That's not our aim. I think we can get very sensitive and we can have some lasting impact and probably cause some harm. What we are trying to focus on is always where your strengths are, and how do those strengths link up between the different areas. Okay, so let's go a little bit further now into EIM. Now, EIM are going to be responsible for building this world-class team, making sure that the careers of the people that are involved are progressing and they're moving forward. It's really nice to be able to set to those professionals to say, for example, if you want to be a data modeler, how do we take you from A to Z where you've reached the top of the mountain? That is really important that we take you along there. Okay, so just in terms of that, let's describe the problem statement. And I'd really like to do this in conjunction with Christine, because there's so many times that Christine and I have been on projects, and then we're doing this amazing work, and she's got to take people along the journey and convince them that this is a good idea. And in some cases, it's a complete change. I'll give you an example of one project we worked on where we went from just Excel, basic Excel, and we jumped them all into Power BI. So these people didn't really have an understanding of self-service analytics. And Christine did a great job of saying, "Oh, we got to break them up. We got to give them training. We got to create some videos." And then we started to realize the challenge that we faced to get the people across the road and onto the other side. Okay, so this is our problem statement. As an EIM manager, you need to upskill the data management capability within your department, within your team, within your knowledge area, within your community of practice, in a fast-paced and ever-changing environment that requires a combination of talents to drive business value and data-driven decisions. Okay, we start off with an employee. We find an employee who's come to join us. They have been asked to fulfill a specific role. It's not always the role that they are skilled and capable of doing, and this is quite interesting. You'll find people that have been doing a lot of data quality or BI, and then they want to go into data governance. So they're moving into a new role. And how do we make sure that they become comfortable as quickly as possible? There was an interesting measurement that we had for people when they used software, was almost the amount of time that it got for them to go from being fearful of this new software to being confident and capable, and to be able to work it without stressing about whether they're going to make a mess or a problem. So it's this employee, they have to fulfill a role in the organization. Are they going to be able to succeed? Do they know what they need to do? Do they understand how they're going to be measured? And they have to deliver the results. Okay, and we see this in agile teams, and we had a long chat when we built a community of practice, where we said, well, now that we're having teams, multidisciplinary teams, and you may be the only data quality person on the team, you can get isolated from your data quality support structure, and now you're having to deliver without anybody around you. So that can cause some tension, and we've got to be able to overcome those challenges, and we have spoken about developing a community of practice to help you with that. So we have to deliver the results, and so to increase the performance of our employees, we need to measure the acquired and current competencies and abilities of the team. Okay, so we typically start off at an individual level, and then we roll up to the team, and we can roll up to departments depending on where you're at. And so we need to know how to do this. Now, I don't know if there's anybody around that has actually done this from a data management team point of view and a perspective where you're assessing the competence of all the people involved, be it a data steward, be it a data governance person, a metadata, a data quality, or do we just drop people on and say, that's fantastic, get on with your job, and hopefully you can deliver. Now, I do see there's a question from Connie. How do you go about improving the areas you're weaker in? You might answer that later. Yes, we will certainly do that, Connie. We'll talk about that aspect. Now, what we've done is use the DMBOK data management maturity assessment, and we'll show you how you can apply that to your own development. Okay, so we measure the acquired ability of the team. We then want to establish what is the desired compared to what is the required of the position. So you'll hear me mention this over and over again. When it comes to knowledge, skills, competencies, and attitudes, we talk about what have you acquired up until now. So do you know how to behave as a data steward, as a data governance specialist, as a data quality? They tend to have the behaviors and attitudes towards work. What is your desire in that area? Do you desire to be a thought leader, a specialist, a manager of data quality people? And then what is required of your position, right? So here we go back to employee comes along, they need to fulfill a role and they need to deliver the results. So establish what's desired. And then we want to confirm the individual and the team learning path to achieve what is required of that role. Now, I certainly know that this is something that Christine spends a lot of time as a change manager on data projects, helping people with this path. Christine, would you like to share anything from your side?
Yes, Howard. I mean, this is a simple formula, but it's quite difficult because people sometimes don't have the same idea of where to go, and the organization wants to steer them in another direction. And I think that second part where you're talking about desired and required, there needs to be a discussion and alignment. And we're so performance management driven and results driven. We kind of skip that step and we tell them what to do. And a lot of the time, it's a misunderstanding they have. For example, I mean, one can't go if you don't have the basics of data and the basic competencies, being in data management, you can't start working with AI because that's a higher level of operating. If you don't have basic communication skills, you can't influence, a higher level of discussion. So this builds on, and people need to, especially speaking to the EIM managers, they need to meet their people where they're at and then have the discussion so that there can be an alignment between what the individual desires and what the organization requires, and find a balance, and then that forms part of the personal development plan, the team development plan, the organizational development plan. But that middle step is often a miss. And just to bring in Connie's point about weaknesses, we'll talk further about why we went with Strengthsfinders. But on the weakness side, we need to work on people's strengths. So if I'm not very analytical, but Joe in my team has got better analytical skills and I'm more strategic, within the data knowledge area and realm, it requires both those types of people, that type of thinking, those types of skills. So leverage off their natural abilities rather than trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And that's why that middle step is so important, because then you get alignment, commitment, buy-in, and then the individual is not just doing their job, they are willingly understanding where they fit in and the value they can deliver.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I think that's very important. The area that we are focusing on, and the area that we're going to take you through now, is measuring the acquired and current capability of the team. So, and I always find this interesting, is to say, if I need to be able to do or this project needs to deliver a data strategy, do we have people on the team that have experience in delivering the data strategy? So what is the current skill level like to be able to take on something like this? And that's what's important to us is are we putting people on the projects in the sprints that have some level of experience, or do they have the support? Now, Reno has also raised the point of different sectors. Yes, that's also a challenge. I mean, I have to agree, as a data modeler, I find that whilst I'm very comfortable with data modeling, sometimes I don't completely understand the domain that I'm in, and I pick up challenges there as well. But I think that also comes down to a sort of just an openness to warn the project managers and the sprint managers and the scrum masters that they in that situation, and they would need some guidance, or you would need some guidance. So this is where we're focusing on today. We're focusing on measuring the acquired. Now, we spend quite a bit of time trying to understand how to do it. We've come up with this approach where we've taken 3 levels of assessment. And the reason we've done that is a lot of the times when I interview and I talk and I have chats with individuals about their careers, some of them, and depending on the seniority or the junior level, it's all about, I want to be a manager, or I want to be a project manager, and a lot of it's driven maybe out of the fact that they don't want to be the guy that's been chased down the road. They want to do some of the chasing. I'm just using an example, but I find that in the initial phases, the choice of the target destination is not always clear and not always understood. So we're trying to understand all sorts of different aspects of the individual and the team. So we're finding some really nice team dynamics about how do you get the right set of diversity within the team. So have you got the right combination of randoms and sequentials and people like that, that you're not just, you're not always going to be thinking in the same way. So these are the 3 approaches that we've looked at, and we are seeing quite a bit of success. We also had one of the criteria that we used, and I was really glad that David Finley spoke about the amount of people that are using Strengthsfinders. We're seeing a lot of uptake, and to be honest with you, I think it's 900 Rand for a complete test, the 34 strengths test, whereas some of the others can go into the 10,000, 15,000 type of scenario. So, okay, now I will get Veronica to talk on the different levels.
Sorry, Howard,
yes.
To interrupt, I just wanted to also just compliment you on the combination, because the data management is so, this is a rounded, holistic kind of perspective of the individual assessment and the team as a whole, and how they complement each other. So I think what we also need to just mention here is this combination. The first part, the data management assessment, is talking to the specific data areas and the levels within that. The thinking styles are looking at the natural thinking kind of ability or default of the individual. And the Strengthsfinders is actually looking at the level at which that person operates. So the one is specific to data, and tells you which would best suit the individual. But the thinking styles and the Strengthsfinders finish that whole picture with the other aspects. So I just wanted to mention that, because I think that's an important differentiator.
And I think this is why we started this whole game, was that we felt that, I could go to human capital, or I can even go to Strengthsfinders, and they can tell me my strengths. But how does it help me for the current data management role that I'm applying for? I want to go and do data quality specialization. Now, I'm a strategic thinker. Now, how do I map these two together? And especially for EIM managers, is how do we relate? How do we build that team, and how do we make sure we got the right people within that? So, and I find it as well, both with change management and project management. Yes, you can do change management on any data management project without understanding anything about data. But you do a 10 times better job when you do understand data as a change manager, and you know what it's all about. Same with project management, I believe, is that scenario. Now, I'm not saying you can't run a good project without understanding data, but I believe you can do it a lot better when you do understand it.
Howard, if I may just emphasize, people underestimate data. And to your good points about having the knowledge and the background, I'm talking now from experience and us working together. I know change management. I've done it for many years. But when I worked on the data projects with you, I suddenly realized data is complex, it's multi-layered, and also it's truly transformational. So it's got its level of complexity, and it definitely is an advantage to have that knowledge.
Yeah.
I'm just supporting what you were saying earlier.
And it was actually nice to work with you on several projects, because then I didn't have to go back to basics each time. You could hit the ground running, and you could start sharing that with people and execs. You could start at the right level. Whereas the very first time we spent a lot of time in the coffee shop, not that we didn't after that, but the levels of discussion were quite different. So that was helpful. And I certainly saw a lot of value in spending time with you on that side of it. Okay, so this is basically our playbook in terms of the data people playbook for EIM managers. We believe that it starts at the data strategy. When we're building the data strategy, we understand what are the data management enablers that are going to resolve the friction that business has with data, and then what roles are required to fix that. And that's where we get our people gap to say, okay, shucks, you want to build this data strategy and you want to go into this level of analytics, or we want to do this level of metadata, but I don't have those appropriate people to do that right now. So very quickly, I can say this is your data people gap. Now, we've got a people gap, and now we've got to look at the people within the organization to say, how do we fix this problem? Can we make use of the problem? What are our resources within those different areas? So it's almost like doing a maturity assessment on our individuals, on our people, to be able to say they can handle these tasks, or that's where they desire. Okay, so I'm going through a little bit quickly because I'd like to get you through to some of the analysis that we've done. Once we've done the people gap, we then do what we refer to as our data management professional assessment, where we look at the thinking styles, we look at the strength finders, and then we do a knowledge area, knowledge, skills, competencies, and assessments. Yeah, Connie, you are right. We haven't found anywhere where we can say that you're wrong for the job. What we have found, interestingly enough, is some people want to get into project management, and we're finding that there's some really good project managers out there that we've touched bases with, and they dominant in the sequential area. And then when we pick up the randoms, we say, yeah, you probably can do it, but you're gonna have to spend quite a bit of time on getting to that sequential area that you probably don't work as strong in. So it's not to say you can't do it and you have to focus on it, but let's do it at the right time. So once we understand all of this stuff, we then go into establishing the career path or the learning path from where you are now to where you need to be and where you desire to be. So how do we go from acquired to required to desired? Okay. All right, so that's the playbook. That's how we believe we should be working. And of course, it's circular, right? So if we redefine the strategy, we've got to relook at the roles. And I always, in my data strategy, almost what I call the intermediate strategy is dealing with the people. Do I have the people in the right position? Christine.
Thanks, Howard. Just to add, Llewellyn asked a question, but before I go there, I just wanted to add to what Connie has asked. You know, a lot of the assessments are just a guideline. And when management get assessments, whether it's for themselves or for the team, it's very important to handle it sensitively. Because I have an impression that I'm good at something and an assessment says I'm not. I'm not only going to discredit the assessment, I'm going to fight my own reality and belief. So it's a discussion, and to use it as such and a guide. And often the person realizes, gosh, I really had the wrong understanding of my abilities, especially with the Strengthsfinder. It resonates with you a lot on, I am actually more this way than that. So maybe project management isn't what suits me best, but maybe something more analytical, whatever the case may be. But what I'm trying to say is, on face value, a lot of these things look like black and white, but it's actually a gray, open, transformative discussion. I think it was Socrates that said, to know thyself is the greatest wisdom. And that's really what an assessment is it just opens up the mind to start looking at gaps and things that they can see about themselves that they didn't know before. The other so please, EIM managers, what I'm trying to say here is handle all assessment data sensitively, because it can have a severe impact on your reputation, on the program's reputation. Make it a discussion. Then Llewellyn asked a very good question, and this is really a change answer. So I'm going to take it, if you don't mind, Howard.
Sorry, sorry, Christine, could I delay that one a bit? I feel like I haven't even got to the meat yet.
Sure.
And we'll certainly come to that one. If Llewellyn's got some time afterwards, we'll certainly get to that. But I'm just a bit cautious of not making the 5 o'clock thing, and we can then have some subsequent ones after that, if that's okay with you.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Okay, so there we've got the playbook. This is the flow that we're talking about. I will get Veronica to describe these in detail. And then after we've done the assessment, then we design this learning pathway. Okay, so we've got the metaphor of climbing the Mount Everest. We get you to the base, we get you to the airport in India, and then we get to the base camp, and from the base camp we climb all the different camps. So this is a pictorial view of your path, and we'll bring that in further discussion. So I just wanted to now start and hand over to Veronica from this section. So we'll take all the different sections, Veronica, if you wouldn't mind, and then we'll go to the overview.
Great, thank you so much. The thinking, we decided to do a kind of a 3-level analysis. I'm sure Howard told you, when we found that we didn't get a focused enough response from the professional assessors. They're as good at assessing people's cognitive abilities and good at assessing people's ethics or their honesty, but they didn't have a mapping to the data management areas. So we thought, well, we'll have to start going back to the drawing board. Christine and I were doing a bit of brainstorming, and one day I remembered that about this Gregorich's thinking styles, which I did when I was actually teaching kids. The thinking styles here there are 4 of them, but they're organized into 2 categories. The first is the way that you take information in. You either take information in a concrete way, in which case you are relying on your senses, and everything's kind of black and white, and you don't really have that good way of getting emotion. You know, it takes the emotions out of it. Concrete people are not fluffy. They don't have the emotional perceptions as much as the abstract people. The abstract people take information in through the senses, but also they're able to get other perceptions. It's, like extrasensory. The way we organize our information is between concrete and between sequential and random. Sequential people have to start in the beginning and work along a list, and sequential people get very uncomfortable if they have to multitask. whereas random people love to multitask. They've got no problem with with sorting their information in different chunks and jumping between them. They have this ability to create their own links, which sequential people do not have. So we thought that we would analyze ourselves, Howard and me. It's a real quick test. I put the link there on the chat. It's 15 questions where you have to pick out 2 words in each question. It takes you under 10 minutes to do. And it'll help us to get more data for our hypothesis here. So have a look at Howard and me. I'm very concrete sequential with a bit of abstract sequential in there, and Howard is so concrete random. Concrete randoms tend to be your kind of risk takers. They don't really have too much concern for people's feelings, but they see the future and the big picture, and they head for it, and everybody else must tag along. Abstract randoms are team players. The relationships are super important to them, so they're the kind of people that you'd want to have managing a team, sorting people out in a team. The relationships are key for them. Abstract sequentials is the scientist profile. Sequential organizing, but able to think out of the box and follow hunches and their own perceptions. So we find most scientists in the abstract sequential, and we'd expect the good technical specialists to be there. And yeah, you've done it, Sam. Oh, cool. The concrete sequentials are the audit people. So that's me. I'm an audit person, and Howard is a risk taker. That's this little slide here is what we put when we give you feedback. If you do it, we'll send you the feedback. We'll send you the explanations. We're not actually going to interpret it for you. You can use this to interpret yourself. But this is in terms of a learner. But working is learning. You know, as you are working, you're learning all the time. So we felt that it was absolutely valid to put in a learner thing. And what it says here, it just helps you to decide what is comfortable for you, what you like, and what is hard for you. So what is hard is not a weakness. It's just something that it's great if you're aware of it, and then you can work around, because everybody's got to do work that's hard for them. It's just that if we recognize and we have a team to support us in the areas that aren't easy for us. So that's there's some further explanation of that in the feedback when you get it. Now the Strengthsfinder, Christine had done this one. Strengthsfinder was revised. It's now called Clifton Strengths, and you get it from Gallup publisher. It's 900 and something rand to get your full profile done. And these strengths are your natural strengths, your natural talents. It's what you automatically view. Oh, sorry, I need to just go back to where. Can you just go back to that spider diagram of ours?
Which one?
The mapping of thinking. Some people seem to map very strongly in opposing things. So someone could be concrete sequential and abstract random at the same time, or abstract sequential and concrete random. That doesn't mean that they've got a split personality. It just means that they're adaptable, and when required, they can operate in both areas. Anything over 30, a score of 30, you operate in comfortably. Anything under 30, you prefer not to do. So yeah, that's just the way it's aligned. So strengths finders, we have 34 natural strengths that they've identified. This test also didn't take a long time. It took me about 35 minutes to do. And it comes up with your natural strengths within these different domains. And we are mapping, and hopefully that our hypothesis works out, that strategic thinkers are those kind of people that would naturally head to be a strategic role, such as a CDO, high executives. The relationship building type of people we would expect them to be to abstract randoms. They're into the relationships, the teams, and they'd make excellent managers.
Okay, right. I have just a bit further on, I've listed all.
Oh, you've listed it. Okay, so
questions.
this was eye-opening for me as well. You know, the different strengths that came up. It's really revealing. It's worth doing. And the knowledge area assessment. Okay, there's our little block. There's also a code for the thinking styles quiz if you want to do it on your phone. When we get people coming to training, we've asked them to what their big picture is. That's why we're using the Mount Everest analogy, because your data management career is a journey. It's actually a lifelong journey, and you need to have support all on the different parts of your journey. So we get people in, we say, what's your big picture? What's the view from the top of the mountain? And as Howard said, a lot of them, when they're still young, they say, I want to be the CDO. And as they get older, they think, I'd like to be a specialist or a thought leader. So it changes as you mature and grow, but it's good to have that in mind. So we get people in, and we'll do this initial assessment to see how they align and how we can best support them with training material and any other support material. So entry levels, first go to entry. First stop, everybody must do the CDMP. So that, remember, was how it had the pathway. We land in Lukla in Kathmandu we fly from Kathmandu to Lukla, and then we trek for 2 or 3 weeks to get strong, to get all our knowledge in place, to get tools in place, and to get acclimatized. And that is going through the book to get ready to write the data management fundamentals exam. That's the first one. A CDMP professional or master requires 3 exams. So it's a journey. You don't have to do them all at once. You can even take a couple of years to do all 3 of them. And we're there to support you to get completely certified. And at that point, a person may have much more idea about which is the path they want to go on, such as specialist, thought leader, and executive. And we've got all of that mapped out with training courses, extra work, extra certifications such as Steve Hoberman's data modeling institute certification, and case studies, so that we can build up people up.
So I can handle this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Veronica. Thanks very much for that. I think there's a lot more. So, and I'm just conscious of time, so moving a little bit further ahead. So what we've done with we spent a lot of time trying to work out how do we bring in the DMBOK or the knowledge area competency into our equation. And yes, people may not know about DAMA, but saying if you want to be a data governance specialist or a data modeler, they understand that, or a data architect or a metadata specialist, records manager, those type of things. So you don't always have to share with them the DAMA framework, but those job profiles are pretty standard in the industry. So what we did was to say, well, why don't we take the way in which sometimes I've done a DMMA, the Data Management Maturity Assessment, and apply it to competencies. So really what we're saying here, and this is the CV that we talk about, is that we will go through those different knowledge management areas and produce a CV. And I don't know if you guys are anything like me, but every single time I get a job and they want a data architect, I've got to go and rewrite my CV to say this is the data architecture experience. I've had so many data modelers, so much data lineage, whatever the deliverable is for a data architect, I'll then restructure my CV. And it's a whole lot easier if it's done on a spreadsheet or on a database. And then we've taken that mapping from 0 to 5. You guys know that from a maturity. We talk about absent. Ad hoc is, can the individual create the deliverable with guidance? And that's not other people doing it for you, but are you able to go with it and have some level of guidance? Are you able to repeat it? Have you been able, can you define policies and standards? Are you able to get to a delivery specialist within a certain area, or are you optimizing? Are you looking at being a thought leader and improving the way we do stuff, creating new techniques and things like that? So that's the mapping that we've done, and it helps us bring it all together. And what we've extended with the DMMA is, I'm sure you guys know, when you do a maturity assessment, you say, okay, where are we now? What has the department acquired? And what is our target maturity in the next year? And we call that what is desired, what is our desired one. But we also then have a required to say that I need you to do this job, this work now, and that is the required, and that's sort of what Christine was talking to. All right, then we're trying to bring this all together. So we do these individual assessments, but what do they mean together as a whole? And this is what the report looks like for your team. As an EIM manager, you can see it's by organization, by team, by respondent, and by community of practice. And you can see the sort of results. We've got 83 respondents that have responded, so we're getting quite a good set of data, which is really helpful. And these are the questions that we're looking at. Okay, so the first one is, are there any correlations between a thinking style and a knowledge area role? Now, just to explain to you that we're not that weird in terms of this. We actually had a university in the Western Cape, I think it was in Stellenbosch, and they were doing a thinking style mapping to nursing. Okay, so they actually said, well, what types of nurses, and I think that was all the way from peds to whatever it was, do we have a predominant thinking style? So they actually did quite a bit of that work, and it was a really interesting paper. It was about 180 pages that Veronica worked through, and that was quite interesting. Then the next one we want to look at is there a relationship between thinking style and Strengthsfinders? And then is there a relationship or correlation between Strengthsfinders and knowledge areas? Please note that I'm using correlation. I'm not using causation. Okay, so I'm not saying that if you're a random, like Paul, an abstract random, then you're going to be a great CDO. Please, I'm not saying that. We're just talking about correlations. We're not saying causation at this point in time. So those are the three links, and then we want to say, are there correlations between all three? And that's number 4. Now, our hypothesis that we're trying to do, and this is Veronica and I keep on looking at the numbers, looking at what people's results are, and we're trying to prove certain things. So, is there a correlation between random and CDO? Is there a correlation between an abstract random and an EIM manager? Is there a correlation between sequential and executing? So these are our hypotheses, and we'll share that with you. But what we can say is these are what we've observed up until now, so certain correlations. So our observations have been the following that we've picked up from the data, that we're picking up that EIM managers and abstract randoms, there's quite a good correlation on that. We've also picked up that sequential and executing, we picked up several of our Scrum Masters, our project managers and things like that. There's a strong relationship between sequential and executing. We haven't found anything on, we've got some hypotheses in these areas, but we haven't found anything. And then the other one is that we believe this combination of random, strategic, and CDO. So we're seeing that sort of pattern come up in this scenario. Okay, so I'd like to just share with you some of the results, and I'll take you into Power BI. So we've had 2 formal organizations that we've gone through. One is, of course, Modelware, so we keep on trying it on ourselves, and partners. So we've got a few others involved, and we're busy working with the academy and a group of grads in an assurance company that we're working with right now. So the type of analysis that I'm doing is I'm doing it at an industry level, or basically at a sort of overall level. So these are our sort of scores and our dominance in terms of across everybody. So we're finding abstract, sequential, at this stage is quite dominant, which is an interesting observation. And then we have our randoms, concrete random, concrete abstract, and then concrete sequential. So Veronica is quite rare. Now I do it, the next level I come down to is the organizational analysis. So here you can see I've compared the insurance organization with Modelware with the rest of the community. And you can see we've got quite different profiles. That doesn't mean that anyone's right or wrong. It just means that these are the differences that you can pick up within your teams. Then I've come down within Modelware at a team level. And what you're seeing is a scenario where the one team is quite balanced in terms of they don't have any highs and lows. They've got consistent. There's quite a narrow margin between them. Whereas with our CDOs, we've got one guy that's sitting way out there in terms of concrete random, who's one of our suggested CDOs, and then of course we've got some sequential people working on that project as well. So that's at team analysis level. Then this is what I wanted to show you in terms of the spider diagram or the radar diagram, where one of our teams is really nicely balanced. So we can see Paul Krobler, who's on the call, has got a high degree of dominance within abstract random. I've got the high degree of dominance in concrete random. And then we've got Christine and Veronica being the concrete sequential, and Christine and different areas. So it's actually quite nice when you see that picture filling out for a team that you've got those strengths across the different areas. Okay. And then we go into individual analysis. So here's Paul, Veronica, Paul Bolton, Paul Krobler, Debbie, that's on there. She's very random. And then we've got myself, JG Carper, and Christine. So nice thing to look at all the different people. And then, of course, to understand when a person is random like Debbie, that she is going to think in different places, in different areas, and trying to get her to work in sequential things. She can do it, but it requires some dedication. And here you can see there's some individual analysis that we've done on certain people. So here's one of the interesting ones where we found, and I mean, it's quite obvious when you see it, but it's amazing how dominant the people in this age group of 30 to 39, those are the dominant CDO wannabes. So those are the guys that are after the CDO level. They're not after the thought leadership and the specialization. And you can see how it comes down to the 50-year-olds where they probably realize they're not CDOs, they're never going to be CDOs, so I don't want to be a CDO. And they probably understand all the hassles that the CDOs go through. So that's an interesting observation. So here is all distributions that we've got. It's total. So now I wanted to just jump over to Power BI and just give you some understanding of how powerful this tool gets. And now I suppose it's quite helpful when one can have the observations or the questions. So, for example, here is Modelware, and you can see as an example, here are our dominants. So we dominant on the concrete random across everybody. When we look at our strengths, we've got quite a high degree of strategic thinking, but not radically different. So if I compare that with the insurance organization, you can see the differences. They quite enhanced or focused on the strategic thinking. Now, the amazing thing about this is when we presented these results to the lead, the head of the academy, she said, that's exactly what we were going after. We were going after grads that had strategic thinking and could execute. So that was actually really nice to be able to see that. But now you can see how we've mapped into the data management knowledge areas. So can you see now how we've been able to link the knowledge areas, and we're saying if we look at these guys, there's a high degree of competence or rating within the enhanced, which is the big data. And then there's very low on the data governance, on the maintaining and things like that. So we then moved over to sort of our knowledge area competencies, and we could see, and what I have done is I've just masked that. These are the sort of different, and now you can start seeing the data management maturity assessments. So for this respondent, that's the capability of that respondent across all of these different areas. So that was quite exciting to say, wow, so I can see that this person knows nothing about data storage. That's quite interesting. In terms of being a big data and the big data engineering, you got to know how to do those transformations. You got to know how to wrangle data. You got to know how to put it into the data. So writing of data is not one of their strengths at this point in time. But they've got a good understanding of data quality, so that's very comfortable. Data integration, they're a bit weak on. That's a bit concerning. That would be risky for me. Metadata, they're down on data security, and then data architecture. And then we've got some data modeling and design. So just to pause and take a breath, are there any questions? Are there any observations? So I can go around all over the place showing you different people. And then we've also got some nice variances that we've been able to pick up in terms of, with this bunch of people, we can see that they were all very strong on the big data and data science. When it came to the BI, they were pretty weak. When it came to reference and master data, they had this guys that had done some and then others that had done nothing. Data storage, they had done nothing. Unstructured data, they had done nothing. Data integration, very low. So there was this really interesting debate and discussion that we had with them in terms of understanding how they needed to build some of those strengths. To Christine's point about looking at your foundations, getting the truth before meaning. That was what Scott Taylor kept on sharing with us. So maybe I'll just give you guys, or take a break and give you guys a bit of a chance to ask some questions and what you'd like to look at. Are there any questions? Yeah, so Sigrid, would you not want a balanced team to cover all the aspects? You're 100% correct. So that's exactly what we're looking to do, is to get the right level of skills. So when you analyze your skills, you can ensure that you've got the right areas covered. So that's what we're trying to do. And I do feel that doing a data management maturity assessment helps us understand that. You know, we spoke to people and we said, for example, do you know the different storage mechanisms like the acid and base? And it's like, we don't even know what you're talking about. So, Veronica, I see you wanted to.
Processing types.
Processing types, yeah. Okay. Johan, you got a question there. How is emotional state affecting your results? So are you talking about your performance, Johan? So what is the current state of your emotional state in terms of your performance? Is that the question?
Correct. And also, if you're in a sense that you're kind of maybe down from whatever might happen in your, let's say, family environment.
Yeah. You're correct. Now, Christine may have shared some of that in terms of picking up some of that in terms of the output on your thinking styles and Strengthsfinders. I know, Christine, we did have a chat about that. I don't think there's any direct element that we can point to say you're not feeling great at the moment. One of the things, Johan, that we actually tried to do was to ensure that doesn't matter how you felt, and I think it was Esty that we had, and she's gone, but she actually did it almost 10 years apart and came up with very similar answers. So it was helpful for us to see that consistency in terms of those assessments.
Howard,
Yes.
David here. I had exactly that same experience. I've done Strengthsfinder 3 times actually in the last 11 years, and the results weren't exactly the same, but they were very close to the same.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you weren't able to change. It means that it is who you are.
Right.
If your emotional state is relatively mature, those teams will keep on coming out the same way unless you've done something very, very drastic to try to change them.
Yeah.
So that'd be one aspect. The second aspect in emotional state is I wouldn't take these tests in times of duress or stress. Right. It's definitely something you don't do in the middle of a work day, just while you have 10 minutes between meetings. Definitely not a time to do this thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, David. Thank you very much for that. Christine, was there any insight that you had? I know we had a brief discussion, but Johan, I don't think we it's certainly an impact, but it's almost a case of Christine, you probably know how to deal with some of these things.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like attitudes as well. Situation dependent. So to what David was saying, your core stays the same. Obviously, you want to write those assessments when you're in a resourceful state, and they will generally be consistent because that is your core persona, right? But when there's emotion, so I don't know if anybody knows situational leadership, which basically calls on different styles for different people scenarios as they work through a development path until you can actually delegate a job to them. And that takes into consideration that people are actually going through a process. But emotion can derail certain things.
Yeah.
So I would really take David's advice there. But it is worth a consideration, Johan. Nice to hear your voice.
Thanks, Sustreen. Nice seeing yours as well, man. Long time no hear.
And I miss those days. Anyway, sorry.
Okay. Guys, are there any other questions? So maybe I'll just go through some of the other visualizations. This was quite interesting. When I first saw this box plot, I nearly got a fright because there were no variances. And then I realized it was by age group, and we actually had all of the same, kid or the grads coming out there. So of course there were no deviations. So, but if we do remove those, this is what it looks like with the different age groups. Okay, so what we are seeing is that we are seeing a predominantly higher abstract sequential grouping with almost consistent distribution. There's not a lot of levels of change other than the abstract random, which was an interesting pattern that came out. What else can we look at? Individual analysis. These are the different respondents within the team. The team analysis, so that was also helpful. And then what we have found, and that was something I wanted to show you, is we've been looking at a community of practice. So how would we set up our teams, our community? And we're saying, okay, let's look at all the data architects. And interestingly enough, we see that they predominantly concrete random, which I thought, and this is sort of what we're trying to find is do certain roles have stronger strengths, stronger thinking styles, which I think, and the way I would explain that is that your architects do have to be able to take information in all over the place, bits and pieces. They can't start in the beginning and end at the end. So following a playbook is not always the game. So you'll find that these people are quite concrete or different areas, and then they would be random in their ability to consume information. So they're very helpful that all sorts of people will describe all sorts of requirements and they'll try to put everything in together. There's a question from Marvin. I would like to look deeper into this. It's addressing the thoughts I have about my team dynamics. Okay. Yes, Marvin, that certainly helps in terms of understanding all the different people on the team. And then we look at data analysts. I wanted to see where they were sitting. And actually quite, I think Veronica's point was really helpful there. We were seeing this sort of combination between sequential and random, so they could jump between the two. So that ability to find the insights and the meaning almost needs a way of being able to get to be able to apply a set of logical steps, and then to be able to jump around and test this and do that and play that type of thing. Guys, anything else? I feel like I'm hogging the floor. Are there any other questions? Any other observations? Everyone's quiet. Sure.
I think they're trying to digest that picture, Howard. It's loaded with information.
Yeah, it is. And I think I have to keep on coming back to the combined view of being able to say, look at all the three of them at the same time, because there's no the measure that goes across all of them. And what are we finding? And what is the pattern that we're picking up across all of them? And so that was actually how we held the session yesterday, as we showed all the links and then we took one respondent at a time. So for an example, let's take respondent 77, and there we see high level of concrete, high level of strategic thinking, and enhancing data, so the BI. So this is something that I picked up with Carolyn Carruthers. This is almost a good descriptor for a CDO Gen 2. So this is generation 2 for a CDO. So that was quite an interesting observation that we came up with one of that. But we can take each respondent and say, oh, okay, here we see more abstract sequential, and we work through all of them at a time, looking at the different areas. Now, this was interesting in terms of this person was probably the strongest in data modeling. And we're finding that data modeling can have that high level of process driven, your conceptual model, your logical model, your physical model, getting all your attributes out, going through those processes. I think having a sequential strength is quite valuable in that. Veronica, was there anything you had or insights within that? You're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you've pointed it out, but it's really, I hadn't seen that dashboard that you had where you could pick on the roles. And how the roles come out. That's powerful.
That's what we got that's the work you did this morning on the survey, and you got the roles. We can now match it back a lot better than what we were able to do.
Yeah, thanks.
Is there anyone that would like to ask a more detailed question or make a comment?
Howard, can we answer Llewellyn's question from earlier?
Oh, yes, certainly. Christine, let's do that.
The question was, how do you get buy-in from managers with, where there's no buy-in for data, for DAMA specifically?
Right. So what I like to do there, especially when the managers don't have a lot of DAMA speak, DMBOK stuff, they haven't been there, is actually to stop talking about the DMBOK and really just talk about what roles are required on a project to deliver. And they say, well, you need an architect, you need a data modeler, or you need a DBA in data storage and operations, or you need a developer, and then try to translate it using the job profiles that they are familiar with, and then try to say, but this person has to produce this deliverable, and you don't even need to worry about the DMBOK. You can talk to them about where their understanding is at that point in time.
Howard, I would suggest even something, definitely that, but even before that, when you're speaking to those managers and that, it must be a discussion around the business pain points, the kind of issues that are impacting them negatively.
Yes.
And then pick out the data specific ones and then build a case around it and then link the roles, because that way it's real for them, It's not just trying to throw a body at the problem. It's not trying to throw a framework at the problem. It's like, what is the business issues that you're facing that you want to solve? Right. Yeah.
And how can you fix them? So, for example, if you're constantly getting bad customer data and duplicates, then you can explain how you can make use of master data to ensure that you've only got one customer, and that customer is the customer that you need by data quality. So yes, you can. It's always helpful to have talk from example show them the problems they're having, and then relate it to how it can be fixed using data management. And then there's a question from Reza. Veronica did answer it, but just to give you some more background, what Peter Jackson and Caroline Carruthers picked up is that when an organization takes on a CDO, this is typically new, it's sometimes, depending on their maturity, it could be quite advisable to start off with the CDO Gen 1, where the CDO is more competent from a data management point of view, right? And big data is data management, but more the foundations, and they would get the foundations right. So they would establish good quality data, they would establish the truth in the organization. Once that's done, then there's a good transition to a CDO Gen 2, which is more focused on your analytics and your big data and your data science, and looking for meaning. So you can sometimes, and it's really helpful for you as an individual, if you're more of a CDO Gen 2, then don't go into an organization that's still battling to get their data right and to get the foundations right, because then you're going to just produce bad result or bad answers quicker. And then you can have some interesting things, unless you've got a good understanding of how to build those foundations. But choose the right organization and the right level to where you're finding yourself at the moment, or where you want to specialize. Risa, does that make sense?
Yeah, that was a very good answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so if you read the CDO playbook book from, and then you attend the CDO summer school, they will take you through that in detail. It's really a helpful discussion. And then you can position yourself nicely, and you don't feel, I'm pushed in this way, that way, am I in the right place? Everybody quiet. So, Christine, it may not be easy, but do you have two people for us?
I think, Howard, there were good questions asked. And Connie actually asked 3, and the last one, so she asked around, what about weaknesses, sensitivity about information, and then she asked, did we give consent to the data that's being shown, the people that did the assessments? And I thought, that is quite relevant from a data management perspective. Have we given our consent? And top of mind, it was a brilliant question from that point of view. We got some very good ones. I mean, the one about Llewellyn, asking about buy-in, I think that's a real problem that people have. Yes. So had a lot of value. And then Marvin made more of a statement and Siegfried asked about balanced teams and how do we balance, that balance act. I would say definitely, if I look at the number of questions with that one that was relevant, I would definitely give the one to Connie based on what I've just said. And then the second prize is quite challenging. I mean,
so maybe Veronica, could you support? You're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't know there was a competition, but definitely Connie is the first prize.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Johan's one about the emotional, that we need to be, especially in a time like now, with COVID's been going on for over a year and it's not getting better, and certain countries are getting worse, and we really, really need to be sensitive about how our people are feeling.
Yeah.
I would support that decision. I mean, because it's quite a loaded one and complex. So, yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. And maybe just to answer Connie's question, from a consent point of view, yes, we start off with the thinking style, and that's actually very public. You don't even need to put your name in there. And so we're collecting that. But when you go on the all complete 3, then you'll certainly explain about the upfront scenario in terms of what are we trying to do, what are we trying to deliver, and without your consent, we'll certainly not go any further with any of these assessments. What you'll do find is, for example, if you, and there were 2 or 3 that completed the thinking styles, we send you a Word document with a screenshot of where you're at. We don't do any interpretations. And we would like, and basically what we're trying to do is really just get patterns on the industry and the community. And that was basically, we don't care whether the respondent was Howard Diesel or Paul Bolton. We care about, what are your thinking styles and what are the patterns between the areas. So
Can I add to that?
Yes.
I think Connie was worrying about us sharing all this information now in the meeting. And the personal information we shared was our team. Everything else was anonymized. Yes. So if you do the thinking styles assessment and you want feedback, then obviously you're going to have to give me an email, and probably then your name will be revealed. But if you just want to help us with the research, all we need is your current role and your target role, and then we can add it to our analytics.
There's actually the 3. So
the age.
Yeah, that's correct. But everything else you can set as blank.
Yeah.
Good, guys. Paul Bolton, can I hand over to you?
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Veronica. Thanks, Christine. And thanks to everybody that joined the call. A little bit over time, but I'm sure it was worth it. And yeah, if you missed anything, please ask us. Just drop a comment in the posts tomorrow or the next couple of days, and we'll be glad to send you the recording. And until next time, see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.